Vicki Bender. I live on Stony Lake outside of Park Rapids.
Hi, my name is Dawn Rosbeck. I'm an artist in Menahga, Minnesota.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Simonson, and I'm here today with Don Rosbach, a painter and just lovely person. So let's get started.
My name is Paul Albright, and I reside in Akeley and Nevis area.
I'm Tiffany Bessinen. I'm an artist, an art teacher, and I live in rural Wadena County.
And actually a special thank you to Tiffany Bessinen, Don Rosbach, Paul Albright, and Vicki Bender. Round of applause, please, for my subjects. I guess I can talk about where the inspiration of the portraits came from. I moved to the area in 2012 and had always been doing photography. My interest started way back in high school, where I learned portrait photography and film photography there over 2 years, and also videography. So all this sort of comes from those early education moments, you know, and it's kind of fruitating in my adulthood, I guess. But it kind of comes from various areas. During the pandemic, I had started a portrait series, kind of getting back to sort of people, and I did my family. And so I went about and did the family tree series, where I tried to document anyone who was living, at least on the Leroy side, which is my mom's side, who lived in the area. And got most people. That series is almost complete, but it's kind of one of these long-form projects too that I work from. And then when I joined the Studio 176, we were doing videos of artists who were doing featured artists. So we would do a video interview, because we knew we weren't probably getting a lot of people into our little ramshack studio, and so we thought this is a way to market. And so we would interview, you know, people as they came through. So Barry Ramona, we did these sort of couple series. My brother and his wife were one of them. We did Jill Odegaard, and as we went through, Vicki Bender was actually part of the early featured artists in that as well. And so we were doing, after the pandemic, Don had bought us The Artist Way. And me, Laura, Don, who else was involved with that, Laura? It was Jody Zimmerman, and then Holly from Region 2. And we sat down and went through sort of chapter by chapter. We met each week and kind of went through The Artist Way. And the idea kind of fruitated then to do this sort of portrait series that embraced community, utilizing these points that I'd been exploring. So portraiture, these video interviews, and then I wanted to move more into documentary imaging of the artist within their environment. So with the series, I just started with a video, and you can follow the video interview through the QR codes here and represented, which gives you more information on the artist. And it was standard questions to each of them, talking about their practice, inspirations, what's next for them. And then from that interview, I was inspired by kind of what I needed to capture to sort of fill in that video. You know, so it was through their interview that sort of inspired most of like what images I wanted to capture them in. You know, whether it was them in their paint studio and them painting, or whether it's them, whatever it was. I will admit that time became an issue, and I wish I had a production team for most of this. Once I put a lot into this grant, you know, trying to do sort of an interview, the editing, the lighting, the sound, and then that kind of overwhelmed me, and I got hooked up, you know, a little bit of hiccup there trying to explore video art, you know, and Adobe, unfortunately, Premiere changes so much that you're kind of like, how do you get to that point again? And if you're rusty on something, but you know, this was all about growth, and it was about exploring a new avenue. I normally do landscape and more art photography, and this kind of dug deep into portraiture and trying to tell that story.
So you said the idea came from the original interviews of multiple artists from around?
Yeah.
What was the process of narrowing this down to what we have here today?
Well, it's interesting. Actually, the 4 artists that I was originally going to do aren't even on these walls. So I was going to do Aaron Spangler, Bruce Engelbrinson were 2 people. They'd been working on weaving together, and I thought I could probably explore in their studio and kill 2 birds with 1 stone. But I work 2 jobs, plus I have the Studio 176, so my time and availability, I finally by July got it ironed out, where I battled at, you know, Nieces, and I battled over there and said I need Sunday, Monday off. But there was a lot of hiccups in those first few months trying to schedule artists. And then I had Joe Von Speller, who's out in Osage, was another, very busy people and active lives. I'm a very busy person, and so how I ended up, Dawn was always going to be probably a subject, but I kept her on the back burner, and then she said, yeah, let's do it. And so by July, I was able to kind of get started with her and get moving. Vicki was available, and that came sort of late summer. I said, Vicki, you would be a great candidate for this, can you, so I decided to sort of change tack, and I guess I found the artist who was willing to be part of it. And it took time and negotiation, and the same thing with Tiffany. I bumped into her at the Nemeth Art Center early in the spring, and I was like, oh my God, you'd be perfect, Jill and was, I think, docenting, and you were picking up something for the art show, and it just made sense. And so this series kind of just came from negotiation and talking about this community. Now, Aaron and Bruce are not off, I'm going to continue with them. I'm, just with less pressure, trying to get 4 completed for this grant. So this project will continue forward. I just will take time.
So the grant was you needed 4?
I said 3 to 4.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ended up, doing the 4. And it made sense. And I did more photos than I probably intended. Like if I eventually want to do this is sort of, instead of doing a presentation on what I said in the grant is, I'll do a little lecture and talk about the process and show people sort of this, and I thought, why not thank you, Dawn, for letting me put up a show. So I thought I'd do a mock-up show of what the eventual kind of project would be. It'll be with much more artists from the region, and probably less
How many more do you think?
image. I think a good dozen is where I want to be before I then approach other museums to maybe do an exhibition. And then I think with that I want to accompany it with possibly a book or something of the region, kind of celebrating the Heartland Lakes and all the artists who's chosen to make this their home and be creatives in that space.
I applaud that.
Yeah, well, thank you. But it's a nice celebration. This community has given so much to me. It's like I joined the Nemeth Art Board in 2015, and it just opened my eyes to this whole community in the area. And it just became support. I met all these people through those sort of interactions. And it's just sort of a love letter to this community and those people that have sort of helped me along in the journey and have been mentors or even just someone that I admired, and it's a celebration of that, which allows a creative spirit to continue in this region. And that's where I hope it will end up, it's just sort of this document of time. If there's no more questions, all right, Vicki.
I thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah.
I feel so honored to have an interview.
Yeah, well, it was an honor doing you. Yeah. You've done so much in this community, and I first came here with the blank canvas, and you were kind of this sort of, spark in the region that I think needed a spotlight.
Thank you.
Yeah. Same with Tiffany. We started the studio together, and we were working at Morning Walk together, and I was like, hey, you want to join us? And she's like, sure. And it was just that spirit, and I just thought I have to, she was a perfect candidate for this. And unique voices. Each one of them have their own sort of style.
So just talk about process a little bit. Was there any particular image among these as you're working through the series that sort of triggered something that opened a door that provided a little bit of spark if you started to see things in a different way?
It's had so many, I had so many hopes and dreams, I initially thought the portraits in the end would be these sort of cinematic sort of portraitures in full color, utilizing space and time. I had talked to Paul about it, and we talked about this sort of evening sky of blue and having him in his outside, I have him in black and white in his outside sort of sculpture, area. But I thought at night with blue and then light him, but I realized how many people I'd need to achieve those kind of images. I would need a lighting designer, and I would need, and I had to really just sort of tone it down a bit. But is there an image that sort of sparked the through line? It's interesting because I think Paul was one of the earlier people that I was photographing because he was working on a project, and it was great to sort of document that from start to sort of stages of completion. And I think it was just it was such a great first shoot because he had so many interesting spaces that sort of told his story. This wood shop where he dries things, you know, these kilns, and it just kind of then inspired everything else from there, you know. And in the end, the portrait session, I'll be honest, I don't have a studio for this large equipment that I bought through the grant, you know, and I was kind of like, what am I going to do and how am I going to find a space to finally do these final portraits? And luckily we closed the studio early. I was like, oh my gosh, that's what I can do. I can just use the studio. Moving forward, I probably need to find a space where I can put this portrait series up so I can continue on a sort of standard.
We have a lot of room.
And that's good to know. There you go. And that's the thing. I need to maybe ask around and find out where there's some
Yeah,
available
there's lots of
space.
space around available. Ben Franklin's wide open.
Yeah. I don't know if I answered that question.
No, you've got to bear in mind I taught photography for over 30 years.
Right.
So,
It was fine. It's nice meeting you.
I tend to ask difficult questions.
Yeah. Well, I had talked to you when you came in about culling this show. You know, I have all these images in the end, and where I get sort of choked up, I guess, as a sort of artist, is making that selection in the end. And you'll see some of the process. I ordered all these sort of 4x6 prints first, and then that overwhelmed me. And then I started just going onto my computer and saying, okay, let's narrow it down to a few, print those up, and then make a decision from that, you know. And printing them larger helped because you could see more detail and kind of see what was going on in the image. And then in the end, I think the 6 I ended up choosing was trying to find them in their environment, them kind of working in the environment. I then tried to find different emotions. So I tried to sort of, what are the different aspects I saw in these artists? So the seriousness, about their art, the playfulness as well, which I really wanted to capture as well, is sort of the various personalities of the artist. Whether I achieve that, I don't know. It's a work in progress. So.
Can I ask one more?
Yeah.
Okay, so I know from personal experience that doing work like this involves high points and low points.
Yes.
Sometimes really low points and
Yeah.
sometimes really high points. Can you pick out a couple of those?
Well, I'd say the lowest point is just trying to get to the creative process this year. It's been a difficult, weird year with the way things are going. I mean, just the way our political world is happening right now. I mean, it's happening right now in our city of Minneapolis. And I went down lots of bad rabbit holes and down, but what this did in the high point is putting myself into this. And it allowed me to sort of forget everything for a while and put my mind onto something. And so this whole thing was more of a high point. That got me out of that sort of rut that I was in. And it, like I said, it took me until about midsummer to finally go, okay, enough of, mortar quill, get rid of all that stuff, and let's do this, and get going.
How long did you have? How long do you have?
It's a year. We got our grants in February, and you can start, right away then. My first portion was kind of just, it was kind of a large product. After I wrote it out, I realized, oh my gosh, why did I put so much into this grant of like video interviews into, documentary imaging, and then finishing with a portrait, and then, I'm going to do a whole, and, it was a lot of work. And it overwhelmed me, and overwhelming also was probably a low point where you kind of just don't know where to begin. And so just baby steps, I started, okay, let's purchase that studio that you said, let's find that lens that, you said you were going to buy, and I got the equipment together, and then I started getting the people together, and then that, like I said, had hiccups in the beginning, and so then, you had to sort of just adjust. But yeah.
Jeremy.
Yeah.
So one of your objectives is to capture artists of the area.
Yeah.
And seeing through your lens, through your eyes. What process do you have in place? Because all artists start someplace and they evolve, and they must have an interior opinion of what they are like and who they are.
Yeah.
Have you gone back to any of the 4 artists that you've done this with and asked them, how close did we come to capturing who you think you are in this?
Well, gosh, I'll be honest, I haven't
Because
asked.
they're going to be nice to you.
I haven't asked any of them. I think this is the first time they're mostly seeing stuff. So, I'd love to hear back from the artist.
Well, Paul's got something to say.
Sounds like Bill read the contract.
Well, the main thing for me was to practice portraiture, storytelling, and video. It was about like sort of expanding me as an artist. So in the end, I wanted just to explore this. I've been, like I said, doing landscape and more art photography and sort of abstract stuff. And this was just digging deep into more of a portrait and documentary style. I think I learned a lot, whether I was successful or not, I think part of it is just the doing of it. Most photographers, you got to take 10,000 images before you improve on something. And so this gets me to improve. So it gets me to that point of getting better at, maybe taking a portrait. I mean, the studio...
Great job with black and white. That's a challenge.
Yeah.
Because a lot of your work is in color.
Full color.
And so I was like, no, let's see how this goes. And I'm like, okay, that looks like skin. That looks, great contrast.
That was a challenge, trying, the color images look so good that I didn't want to convert them.
Yeah.
But I wanted a through line through the whole show, in the sense, so in the end I wanted to sort of have the same sort of, as though it comes from the same show. And so I decided early on to go black and white. And plus it just adds timelessness, and color isn't distracting. It becomes more about the subject and the place and the person in it. So you're not really distracted by all this color that maybe will set you off on a different thing. Although color does give a lot more emotion, I figure. Or I think it portrays a little more emotion once you add a red or a green, or the color just sort of. But this allowed me just to sort of concentrate on the subject, I think, a bit.
I have to say, Jeremy, the first time I saw your images of Dawn, who I know the best of any of the artists here, I think it was that low one there with her hand on her.
My favorite.
I was just like, oh, that's like quintessential Dawn.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I personally think you captured at least Dawn very well in terms of who she is and kind of who she represents, and her personality a little bit and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know, that was kind of my first thought of it.
And that was the attempt, with all these. And some artists I knew better than others, but also I just wanted to get that emotion, where there's something, behind the eyes that was happening. And I think she's here going to tell you something. It's like, I think. But I love this one where she's probably just blinking from the flash that I had in that room. But it's her in concentration and in thought. And so I just thought, when I saw the series, that's the one I kept drawing to. So I had to be part of the show. Well, thank you all for coming out on this cold day. That's a wrap. Thank you guys.
My heart is bursting from my chest. I can't sit still or I surely will be killed by cardiac arrest. I cannot hang out as you might have guessed. Can't bring myself to give you my best. I cannot hang out as you might have guessed. Can't bring myself to give you my best.